Good morning, Dr. J. How are you?
I'm quite well, thank you. How are you today, Grant?
I'm doing really well. I've been looking forward to this all day, actually. I know we've kind of exchanged a few messages before, so and given your background and your experience, I feel quite privileged actually to have you as a guest today. So thank you.
Oh, how nice of you to say that. Well, I think that we're going to have a rip-roaring conversation. There's so much going on in our field, and it's really fun to talk about what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, and what we think is coming. So, looking forward to this.
Good. And I think what excites me the most is, as I mentioned, your background, but also where you are right now. The role that you're playing in such a advancing technology field, right? Of communications and the world today is it's quite an interesting space to have to lead people in. Some might say.
It really is because A, it's fast paced, B, the technology issues that big tech of all kinds really facing, cybersecurity issues, AI, customer experience. That one I could go on about forever. But all of those things are present in the integrated telecommunications space where 8x8, my employer, sits. We have 55,000 customers
Wow.
around the world. And so it is, we're experiencing, a little bit of the world every day. Fortunately, knock on wood, we are in good standing, in good stead right now. But as we've all seen, whether it's cybersecurity issues, whether it is CrowdStrike, that did not impact us. I was flying that day, and so it took me 2 days to get home. But
No.
technology is pervasive, and integrated telecommunications is really at the core of connecting people, whether it's individuals through universities, through communities like housing communities. We have many of those in the UK, for example, or whether it is business to business. But there's lots going on, and our job is to help prepare the workforce so that they're ready to take on the challenges.
Awesome. So, for our listeners, would you mind giving us a 60-second intro into you and who you are?
Absolutely. So I've spent about 25 years in people functions. First, 15 years leading shadow HR organizations, eventually taking over and leading the entire domain. My career has really been around three areas: productivity, individual, team, organizational, technology, and then change. Anytime you work with people and technology, there's always change, right? Committed lifelong learner. I have a doctorate in workforce public policy, an executive coach, and I've been in my current role at 8x8 for 2 years, 2 weeks ago. So 2 years, 2 weeks.
Well, happy 2 years. And I noticed, and this is where you're going to test my memory now, but spent some time at Amex and in the financial services space as well as technology.
That's correct. So spent a decade at Intel, spent about 5.5 years at American Express, and have done a variety of things since then, large, small, and startup companies, both as permanent CRO or or as an interim. So it's a great space, and there is so much to be done, and that's why I like the work that I do.
I'd love to dive into the doctorate and your continual learning and always trying to develop that piece. Why don't you share a little bit more for our listeners about that and what you do in that space?
Well, throughout my career over the last 20 plus years, I have been on parallel tracks. And so, with an earned doctorate, I have the opportunity to do some research and also continue to teach adjunct basis. But for the last 4 years, I was a clinical faculty member at the University of Houston in the College of Business, and taught HR, compensation, and in fact created the curriculum that will allow the students to sit for the SHRM exam. That has given me an avenue to test new thoughts, new ideas, and to do research and in what is driving many organizations. The thing that has really driven me, though, is a sense of how do we make things work?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that, what really got me going into the area of public policy, we spend billions of dollars in leadership development, management, environmental health and safety, and other compliance functions, never mind the skill development.
Mm-hmm.
And Grant, we don't get a lot out of it always. And
No.
so the thing that drove me is how do we do different and how do we do better? And so that's what drove me to really dive somewhat deeply into the area of neuroscience, learning, and leadership. It's a fascinating arena, and one that we've been learning so much about the way the human brain works. It's really a new frontier for us in many ways.
Yeah, and I think what's amazed me in as I've spent 15, maybe 16 years working with various different HR professionals and talent professionals is how many actually do delve into the world of psychology, understanding how people work. It's a really aligned field, and to go even deeper with the neural element is really fascinating, and but also quite tricky. I mean, balancing that and also trying to lead a career and as an executive.
For me, one drives the other. And so what I've learned through my research, what I've learned in working with students from around the world, and the University of Houston has a very diverse population. They are a Hispanic serving institution, meaning more than 65% of their students have Hispanic backgrounds. But I've had students from China, from Africa, South America, and hearing and learning about what they're doing only serves to ready me that much better to serve the 8x8 community, because there's just a lot going on in this world.
Yeah, and I'll resist going down the kind of cultural aspects of global talent and global populations, because that is a whole different field to go down. But it is fascinating, and it's one of the things that I find many executives and VP of talent mostly talking about is kind of how do I take this holistic view talent of my organization, but also understand the cultural nuances and potentially not have to have operations in every single office across the globe. And it's a lot of people are attacking it in lots of different ways. It's quite it's an interesting piece.
I think you're absolutely right, Grant. First of all, with the advent of e-commerce through and with the internet, one of the things that has been accomplished with that is suddenly even small businesses can be doing business in various countries. Our daughter is a physician, and an emergency room physician, and she wears these caps to keep her very long and thick hair wrapped up. They come from the Ukraine. And, now I just find that so fascinating. But that's what businesses are confronting today. How do you know how to work with somebody from Ukraine? What are their cultural boundaries? What are their cultural preferences? And as you say, there is a whole science of international business. The Hofstede model is one that immediately comes to mind. And looking at the various components of how people interact from a given geography or country, and they can be vastly different. And it's to your peril to ignore that, because it can be very disruptive to a business.
Well, I am famous for quoting Hofstede's cultural index. It's got me a bit of a nickname, actually, but we won't go into that. But I agree.
I knew we were going to be good friends.
I agree. Ignore cultural nuances at your peril. If you're going to pretend to be able to understand globally, talent as a holistic proposition, you need to understand the nuances. So let's get into what motivated you to build a career in HR. What was it about HR that motivated you, and why have you, stayed so long in doing this career?
So when I graduated from the University of Southern California with my doctorate, I started in marketing and sales, and I've never been so unhappy in my life. I was reasonably good at it, but I found myself gravitating to the individual level, helping individual salespeople get the best out of their experience and bring their best every day. So give me training, give me the opportunity to create a culture or define a culture. And that's really where I excelled. And
Mm.
so I was recruited to Intel to align people and business strategy, and people in the sense of hiring and training. And for the fabs, which is where semiconductors are actually made,
Mhm.
um, it's a very, very precise process, and it includes gases, chemicals, and lasers, and people can die if you're not careful. And so they were out of sync. And so I was fascinated by this, because literally looking at what they wanted to accomplish from a business perspective and say, okay, we're going to build a $10 billion fab over here, and
Mhm.
it will take 3 years. Here's how, when we need to start hiring people, and here's how it takes 18 months to train people. It did. We've cut that down considerably, but just aligning that, and then the results were really fantastic. And for me, where I feel impact and I can see that I'm having an influence, productivity, technology, and change, that
Mm.
really was the call to action. But I'll tell you a little secret, and anybody that's known me for a while knows this. At Intel and at American Express, I ran shadow HR organizations. These were people initiatives that were started because the business didn't feel that they were getting what they needed. And so the central HR became the repository for the HRIS or
Mhm.
for the benefits, and everything else was something that we created: training and hiring and college recruiting programs, succession planning. We did all of that outside of the umbrella of central HR in order at Intel to ensure that manufacturing could produce a product that was, and remains, the backbone of their revenue generation. And at American Express, it was looking at the customer, the card member experience.
Mm.
And again, it was looking at training, providing tools, providing a platform for knowledge management that would enable people to be able to answer those phone calls or those emails. It's a pretty remarkable environment.
Yeah, and you know what I love about that, when we get into kind of talking about sustainable talent models and structures of HR, I think your exposure and experience in those shadow models is going to be very, very valid. And so, before we get into that, what's changed as you've kind of moved up in seniority, taken on CHRO, leadership roles? What's changed from the early days in your HR career to now?
Well, just about everything. If you look at the technology, that's the first thing. Whether it's enterprise systems like an HRIS, and in many organizations, the HRIS becomes the center of truth. And so it's not a nice to have anymore. It really is the center. We have over 400 applications systems that run at 8x8, and that's just our internal operations. That's not our product technology partner ecosystem, which is how we serve customers. But internally, we have 400 applications that run. They all need access to employee's name, and what department that they're in. You know, 10, 15 years ago, that was not as critical, but now that's the core. So that technology, coupled with all the add-ons that we now have access to, and AI, it's a new world. The technology certainly has evolved. The second thing is the world of work doesn't occur in an office as often as it once did. And so certainly there are, if you work in hospitality, you work in a hotel, you work in a restaurant, that is on-prem, meaning on premise. You have to be there. But offices and engineers and creative artists, they all used to be based in an office. And since the pandemic, We now have remote, we have hybrid, we have, office based. That requires an entirely new arena. The third area is that the contract between an employer and employees, I think, has irrevocably changed. And I'm not sure that we have seen the whole of it yet. I think the best is yet to come on that.
But I'm super intrigued about that. So let's just dive into that, because I agree. I think the contract between employee and employer in general has changed, but I also think there are a number of things impacting that. The gig economy, the rise of freelancers and fractional roles,
Mm-hmm.
society today, and how we feel that we get rewarded as individuals, and versus what we're actually getting from our employers, it doesn't match up. So tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on that third point. What is it that you think's drastically changed?
Well, when, and this is a bit ago, but I think it's very telling. I was, when at Intel for 10 years, I was part of the infrastructure supporting the Intel Science and Engineering Fair. 5,000 students from around the world, brilliant, brilliant young folks, and tested, with their own research that they were doing in high school. And I remember talking to this one young fellow. He was 14. He was the youngest of our competitors that year. And I said to him, what do you aspire to do? And he like lunged at me into the conversation and said, I don't want to be tied to a desk like my parents. I want to have kids and I want to participate in their lives. Well, like we were all really stunned. I mean, this was at a time where if you worked really hard and you worked really long. And we began looking at that trend. And truthfully, more and more individuals are saying they want balance to their lives. Now, I won't go as far to say work-life balance, because who knows what that is. But we've got, we have things that are happening in our world that we want and need to take care of. Bright Horizons has come out with a childcare company, has done some really remarkable research. And they found that the average employee spends between 1 and 9 hours per week providing care, support, or assistance. Their children, orthodontist, pediatrician, senior care, taking mom or dad, somewhere to a doctor's or whatever, or an ill spouse or whatever. But 1 to 9 hours, think about that. That's a day a week. And we don't have that. That's not something that you can outsource by and large. You have, you take your kid to the orthodontist, and we are finding in HR, we have to accommodate that. So if you can't take care of your family, you're not a family friendly place to work, and people will choose other options. I think that this idea, as this young man, years ago told me, that they want to be present in their families' lives. And that message that, I carry with me 15 years later, because I see that every day. People have to make choices, and companies can either go along, or if they don't, people will opt out. And I think that was a large part of the Great Resignation, that if people could not fulfill what they felt was important to them, they'd leave. They'd go someplace else.
And yeah, I have to do a shout out to Bright Horizons for their research on that. And anyone who's listening from a HR and talent perspective who hasn't seen that information should look at that, because I think it is a really great piece of work, and really highlights the fact, that people are more present on tasks that they have to do outside of work. And, people want to be involved in those.
Yeah, absolutely. And we live complex lives. And so whether it is a child's soccer game, basketball game, chorus, you name it, we can pretend that we start at 8 o'clock and we end at 5 o'clock. But all of us know, if you're working in a global environment, many of my teammates work in Romania. They are 8 hours ahead of where I am. And so their day is virtually over if they were, and so They do great work. They're absolutely pivotal to our organization. So we have them start at noon. And so they can do things in the morning they might do in the evening, and it balances out. But that's why I say the world of work has really been set off its axis, because we've tilted and now we have to figure out how to do all of this. It's really challenging.
You also mentioned about AI. Okay, so we're talking quite a bit about the people, the emotive aspect, and the psychological aspect. I'd love to dive into from a a people perspective. Where do you think the real focus should be from an AI perspective if you're looking at the organization that you're directly in charge of? So from a HR and people perspective.
So I was having this conversation with a colleague, and it's like, what's the big deal? What's AI? And I said it decreases service time. It can improve customer service done well and wisely. It can shorten cycle time, for example, resume reviews or training or benefit questions. I mean, where do I get my benefit card? Sort of thing. That can be handled by AI very effectively. Embedded AI is prevalent whether we acknowledge it or not. For example, many people may be familiar with an app called Grammarly. And so, it edits for spelling errors and grammar and message clarity. It also, their AI feature will also tell you how you sound. Are you basically annoyed with somebody? And you see the little happy face or the frown or the straight line. That's AI. And so, it's assessing how your message sounds to others. The caution, however, is that you have to watch out for potential bias. You've got to look at protecting intellectual property. But AI is embedded in so much of what we do. I don't care if you pull up your credit card online on your app and you have a chat bot, that's AI. And the AI is embedded in our world, from a functional perspective. It's the intellectual, taking it beyond responding to the general to the more complex, and the things that that take us a long time to do. So AI is here. It's not going to go away, but it's been here for a good decade in various shapes and forms and evolutions. But I know even a research project that I worked on with Watson from IBM 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, uh, it was just amazing what we were able to accomplish. So I think we're scratching the surface. I know it frightens some people. People are worried about their jobs. I wouldn't. I think if you're learning something new every day, you're one step ahead above the competition.
Yeah.
But AI is a factor. The thing, Grant, that worries me the most is that if people, hiring managers, use AI as the ultimate sort of who might be considered and who might not be considered without any other intervention, we know that many AI platforms are male dominated, and they've been built and tested in a male environment, and so it may exclude people of diverse backgrounds, gender, language, ethnicity, all of those things. And we want that diversity. We don't want to be screening out for it. And so you need to make sure that you're very careful about that. It's not impossible, but we just have to be careful.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things to think about that I've been discussing is the compound effect of the users reiterating the information, right? So if you think about the tech industry, and again, I'll just use the UK because the latest stats that I've looked at, 13 or 13 to 18% female representation in some industries. If you're 80% are male and they're using it to input and feedback, then again, you're continuing to feed that bias. And it's a challenge that people do need to be aware of. even in their own organizations, when they enable AI or Copilot, that the user feedback that they're using could be biased as well. And so I'm not sure enough people are thinking about it even further than the input itself, but the usage of it.
Absolutely. And in a way, if you think about it, so in the SaaS technology market, of which 8x8 is an active member, male dominance in terms of developers, programmers, engineers, of an entire variety. It's not, the male dominance in our workforce in those ranks is not unique to 8x8. That is something, look at any technology company. And, I remember at Intel, one of the, we were losing women faster than we could hire them. And so, this is a perennial problem that has been, is 20 years plus. Well, we have to be mindful of that. And if we are intent on providing equity and equality, then AI must be very carefully attended to. It's not impossible, and it's not expensive, but it takes thought.
One of the things that I saw on LinkedIn today actually was the newly launched soft skills training bot. So an AI powered bot that can have a conversation with you and iterate and train your soft skills. And I thought that's a really interesting use of AI and a really quite fresh approach to thinking about how to apply it. I mean, there's so many contextual questions with it, I understand, but I did find that quite fascinating today.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to a startup that is making great progress. They call themselves an online coaching platform based in Germany, in Munich, Germany. And we were talking about soft skill development through coaching. And that, that is an area where many of their clients, and they have many, globally very large companies as in their client base. And they said that that's one of the big things is how do you interact appropriately with other people, whether it's someone more senior to you or someone from a different culture. And their AI use is taking people through scenarios-based learning. Now, we've known for a while that scenario-based learning can be very, very effective, but it's very expensive if you're not using technology to generate the scenarios. And that's what AI affords you. But again, all due care, we just have to be careful about the potential of the structural inequality that we could be building in if we're not thoughtful.
This is a good introduction into our next topic, because we're talking about skills and enhancing skills. Certainly soft skills is one of the top skills that people believe we're going to need as we get deeper and deeper into technological advancements. But the big phrase that I hear a lot in the HR space is skills-based organizations. This passion to get to a point where you are a true skills-based organization. I'm going to preface, I'm not sure whether we've defined that yet as a global approach and how you actually get there. But I would love to hear your thoughts. When people talk skills-based organization and the aspirations, what do you think?
Many organizations have been striving to accomplish or get to that skills-based end state, for decades. But I think people have to recognize the level of sophistication that this really represents. For you to know well enough and in a detailed, analytical manner what skills you need and what, we have programmers, we have DevOps, we have, cybersecurity people. Well, do we need intermediary? Do we need advanced? What is advanced versus intermediate, right? All of that takes definition. And that's why I say there is a degree of sophistication that, is pretty remarkable when you look at it. Now, there are other organizations that will say, I own a bakery and I need to have ingredients and know how to put things together and what the recipes are. That may be less challenging than a knowledge-based work environment, which is fraught detailed and sophistication. I was on a commission for the National Association of Manufacturing for many, many years. And one of the things that we worked on was a skills hierarchy in looking at what skills do you need to have in order to be able to work in a factory, and taking out and away a college degree. And what we had to end up looking at was looking at a domain of interdependent skills. And again, look at the complexity, the overlay that that's associated with. So it's really the combination, because you could be skilled at email, Google, or 365, whatever email you're using. You may be skilled at that, but do you know, like, there's varying degrees. Are you a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced? And so, and who defines that? My mother uses 365. She's a beginner, but she gets what she needs out of 365 email. That wouldn't suffice for me. And that's why I think it's very domain specific. So I think that we have learning and skill development needs in every corner of this globe. And so I understand the buzz, but I would rather see us focus on skill development in context of getting specific things done. And so, if I need a programmer that can operate, using a particular platform called Kubernetes, I know that if they have a certain level of certification, that's all I need. Let's go get them. And, but it's very specific to your work environment.
And there's 2 points I'll pick up on there. First off, I think on a micro level, excuse me, on a micro level, the aspiration to focus on skills and potentially not pedigree or academic, I absolutely agree. I'm for that. I'm absolutely for that. And I don't think I would go so far as to say you don't need academics. I think there's a place for both, but I think that the aspiration on a micro level, job-based level, to focus on skills is probably the right place to start. But I think you're right that the challenge of doing the taxonomies in terms of job architecture, but what people forget is it's not as simple as the task. I've actually seen a few organizations go through this, and we've been part of the talent intelligence or the RPO for that organization whilst they're doing it. The challenge actually comes on getting 8 or 9 people to agree the same thing. They're all saying the same thing, but the challenge is the people. It's actually not the job taxonomy. You could actually map that quite easily for some job families, but like you say, it's the perception of one senior person versus the other person's perception, and that takes time and data and constant revisiting.
Absolutely. And cultural alignment. Because the fact that, if I were to say that this is what we need for a particular, technical individual, an engineer, my opinion versus the head of product or the head of cybersecurity may be vastly different based on the lens at which we're looking at at solving our collective problem. And so for me, it might be expediency. I can hire somebody more quickly with a basic technological degree. And so that's where I think some of the challenge comes in, degree or not degree. And I agree with you. I mean, the people that work in wafer fabs around the world, you do not need to have a college degree. There is a lot of training that goes into that, but you don't need a college degree. But you need discernment, you need an ability to analyze data, you need to follow process, and you need to be able to measure things, So we've got to realize this whole, degree or not degree. I don't think that's the question. I think, what is the outcome that we want? And I have long held the belief that style counts. If you get some, we've all worked with people, they were brilliant, they were brainiacs, and they get, they're amazing at what they do, but they leave dead bodies in their wake. We have outgrown the tolerance for that. as a world. I don't think anywhere in the world that we tolerate that sort of behavior anymore. It still happens, but more and more, I really see us needing to go to that, array and say, okay, what's our job? What do we have to get done? And what is success?
Yeah.
That's the key measure. That is the key measure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also a big fan, I don't know if you've seen it, but of the jobs to be done theory. I don't know if you've read much on that, but
Yes.
I think that it deserves a little more attention actually than it gets in organizations. But yeah.
But, if you think of the evolution of the workforce, which has been, that hamster wheel has certainly been expedited over the last 10, 15 years. But think about it. A job description that was written even 2 years ago is probably
Mhm.
antiquated. And yet I know we just finished rewriting 1,000 job descriptions, and it was a massive undertaking, helped by Grammarly and the AI that is embedded there. But it's everything is a big deal. And then you've got to think of the interdependencies and the sequencing. And, I may do something, but if I do it too soon or too late for you to intersect appropriately, neither of us are successful. And that's the challenge, I think, with this idea of skill and really focusing on the job and with the intent of what happens in the end state, what's success.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other place that maybe AI, again, if we go back to AI, it could look at those interdependencies and could use, large learning models to understand, once you've
Yes.
done the framework, what do those interdependencies look like? But yeah, I agree. And I think, skills based is one aspect of what we're seeing in HR and talent arena at the moment. One of the other things that I just want to touch on before we move to the final few questions is this rise of chief talent officers. I've seen it's not huge, but I've seen it start to rear again. And now this is not new. If you read HBR and Shroom, 10 years ago, they started to talk about the rise of the chief talent officer, but
Sure.
it's starting to take prevalence again. And I'm interested in, what are your thoughts around the structures of HR today? This move to either being people departments or separating people and talent tasks. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So we're actually going in the opposite direction. We're building an integrated talent life cycle. We want the pieces to fit together better. And so what we're on the journey to build is from an approach from the first point of contact, not even in the state of candidate, but the first time that someone learns about the company to their very last day of employment. So it's talent acquisition integrated with talent development, integrated with talent management, which includes performance management, career planning, assessment, and evaluation. We want a life cycle from A to Z. And that's the direction that we are going in. Now, bottom line, chief talent officers may work in high volume hiring environments, retail, hospitality, even manufacturing. I could see how both the turnover and the on-prem need to have employees may make that idea of a talent officer imperative. But in the SaaS world of technology, I just don't see the appeal. Again, from my vantage point where I sit.
Yeah, but it's very, very relevant, because most of the conversations I'm having at the moment with very senior VPs of talent is, the market's been very interested from a talent perspective in terms of talent acquisition, but predominantly. And a lot of the
Yeah.
VP of talent that I'm speaking to are very, very skilled in the talent acquisition piece. But what organizations are asking for now is, do you understand how it integrates with talent management? Are you able to help us move towards that journey? And very, very, very senior ex, top 5 global banking firm VP of talent I was speaking to just last week, and that seems to be, a worry for them. I've been in such a large org where I've been focused on talent acquisition, and now people are asking me for, but I think that's going to become more prevalent. What you're doing is probably, you're slightly a few steps ahead of most orgs in terms of bringing that together. It's important because if upskilling and internal talent mobility is as important as we've all been screaming it has been for the last 2 or 3 years, then we really need to think about how integrated TA is and talent management is.
What really had us going to this idea of the life cycle was there were failure points in programs that we were investing a lot of time and money in. And failure points, not in that the programs were not successful, but there were still ragged edges. And so how do you get rid of ragged edges? You sew them together, you integrate them. And so that's really what gave us this idea of let's really link from the time someone first comes in contact with us and, candidacy, eventually a hire. How are we going to train them? How are we going to onboard them? How are we going to acculturate them, right? All of those things, and make sure they know how to do their job. And then the other aspects of making sure that we understand their output, and gather their input about the work that they do every day. And we're already seeing the green shoots from a journey that we only started about 4 or 5 months ago.
That's super exciting. And I think that will be very interesting to our listeners. And we're coming to the end of the session now, and I'm gutted because there's so many other things I could have dived into. But I think it's important maybe just to finish with the final questions. The first one to talk about, what advice would you give to HR talent professionals who are maybe early in their career, in their first 5 years?
So number one, analytics and numerical acumen is absolutely essential. If you don't know how to work with data, this is not the field for you. Of course, then I don't know what field is good for you, but the business acumen and analytics, absolutely a requirement. Courage. When people ask me what I believe is the number one attribute for a successful HR leader, it's courage. We have to look at employees and tell them no when our hearts scream we want to tell them yes. My philosophy is we try to find a way to say yes, but it may not be in the same vision as the employee had when they came to us to ask us. It is, and we have to be able to tell leadership the truth. And I've seen that cost people their jobs. Don't fall prey to the latest technologies. One of the things that HR gets crucified for is, we have the latest of this and that and the other. And it's like, what problems does it solve? And does it advance the business and the ultimate definition of success? And it may make us a really sexy, vibrant HR organization, but if it doesn't support the business success, then I don't know why we're doing it. And finally, the thing I would tell people is build relationships, because you can't do it alone. And you can't do it just by talking to people in HR. Your finance people, your legal people, your ops people, your product people, your sales people. There isn't a cog in the wheel that's not important. And I absolutely advocate building relationships with all of those. And then as I end every presentation, and every email that I send out to all hands, learn something new every day.
Yeah.
If you do, you're one step ahead of those that don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my advice.
Well, I think it's great advice. And by the way, we had Sabine Malarski, who's the global CHRO for Commerzbank, on a few episodes ago. And one of her things was exactly that. As a big organization, big bank, well known, why are we investing in all this shiny tech unless it's solving a problem? Let's solve a problem. That one really, you and her would get along. And I think the other thing is as well, like you say, is everything is moving at pace and we have to continually learn. I think that is one thing, as someone who didn't follow the traditional educational path from an academic perspective and went back to business school later in life, that really resonates with me. It's something that I felt that I picked up too late again, and I should have picked it up early. And that I wish someone had told me that earlier in my career, to keep learning and keep pushing. Final question. Level Up's mission, we focus daily on developing solutions that elevate the world of work. That is our whole goal. When we interact with businesses across the globe, we want to elevate the world of work. What does elevating the world of work mean to you?
So again, remembering that my doctoral training was in public policy and policy analysis, the thing that I really see that we need to attend to, and interestingly enough, European countries are much better at this than they are in the US. Work is honorable. I don't care whether you're a plumber or a bartender, or a faculty member with a PhD. At the Democratic Convention, AOC, which is she is one of our congresswomen from New York, and she said she was making a comment. Somebody was poking at her and said, "Well, if you weren't in Congress, you might have to go back to bartending." And she said, "I'm okay with that. It's an honorable night's work." And that really, when I heard her say that, that really reminded me that is something that we need to ensure. The second thing is we have to pay a living wage. And if you can't pay a living wage, then either your business model is wrong or you shouldn't be in business at all. Treat individuals with respect. I think that goes hand in hand with the honorability of work. And then expecting all parties to embrace everyone. We are different. I have blonde hair, you have brown hair. You're in the UK, I'm in the US. We're all different, even if we're sitting right next to each other. And if we don't learn how to embrace one another in its totality, you may not agree with everything I have to say, but if you can't be respectful to me, we have no chance of contributing together, right? And appreciating that work is a changing playing field. Nothing is the same. And, service jobs are important and we need to embrace them. Nannies, senior care, the people that cut the lawn, whatever. They are, we need to embrace that and not think of that as lesser than. Because frankly, for those of us who need those services, we can't do without it.
I couldn't have ended better. All work is honourable, and we should be enabling everyone to feel a sense of purpose when they're at work, and that goes hand in hand with embracing the change, or embracing differences. They may be doing a different line of work than you, but embrace it. You might not want to do that. Understand it, learn about their challenges. You might take something away that you could apply back into your day-to-day life. I am sorry that we slightly overrun in terms of the time we had you for, but this has been an amazing insights from you. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was delightful, Grant. And anytime that we can have these discussions on topics that matter, it gets us that much closer to a possible avenue for success. So, I appreciate the invitation, and I hope that your listeners are able to take something away from this.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. Stay connected by subscribing to the Level Up With Us podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or find us on our website, leveluphcs.com. Tune in for the next episode of Level Up With Us. Until next time.